So good afternoon from LCC International University in Klaipėda, Lithuania. So we are very excited to continue the tradition of our webinars presented by Cyber Technology Center established at LCC. If you have been following our activities, you know that our Cyber Technology Center is there to run educational initiatives and share resources related to cyber training. So this is why we do webinars like today, where we can host guests, colleagues, friends that share their expertise with you. And this way, we are promoting awareness and dissemination of emerging technologies. I will remind that we do have two programs that we are currently running through our Cyber Technology Center. The Cybersecurity Bootcamp, which is done in partnership with Cybit. And it's all about preparing you to become the specialist in the cybersecurity field. So just a reminder that we are now accepting applications for a new group that will start on September 6th. And I will post the link to the bootcamp website information in the chat box so you can go and find more information. We also have a cybersecurity essential workshop, which is a one-day online training program designed to address and tackle everyday computer security errors by providing the audience with advanced skills and knowledge so you could be protecting yourselves and your organizations. So allow me now to introduce you to our Cyber Technology Center Director, Dr. Jeff Teo, who will introduce to you our speaker of today. And I will leave the screen in the background while Jeff is introducing you to who we will hear from today. Jeff?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see me?
Yes, but I can, you know what? I will do the stop sharing now and you will be in a much bigger window. Here you go.
Okay, great. Thank you, Aista. Great introduction. Let me take a moment to provide some context and the reason for inviting Jim Kelly as the current speaker for our webinar. And first off, I want to emphasize the recent attacks. For those of you following, there was one about 2-3 weeks ago, the Colonial Pipeline attack, which was a ransomware. And so these stories, these hacks are making the news. So was the meat packing, right, Jim? There was one that came on as well. So we're hearing and seeing lots of these infringement attacks, probes, and I cannot think of a better person that can bring some modern day context and expertise. Jim is a rare individual with the technical know-how. He has been involved in cybersecurity for a number of years and now is in the thick of things, managing the cybersecurity infrastructure at a major university, major hospital in Asheville, North Carolina. Jim and I go back a number of years. He has the honor and privilege of influencing many lives here in my prior establishment with education. I'm very glad that he has a heart for helping the younger generations get involved, mentor these individuals, and ultimately these professionals go out and influence the world. Jim is a rare individual with integrity and ethics, and can also speak to the importance of ethics and in fact faith component. I know of Jim's background, so I am very proud to include him as one of those individuals that can also bring a level of faith and ethics into this important space. With that, Jim, thank you again for doing this. I hand over this webinar to you.
Thank you very much, Jeff and Isa. I really appreciate you setting this up today and for inviting me. I'm looking forward to presenting some information, and hopefully we'll have a good Q&A session at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, if that's okay. Okay. Let me know if you can see that okay.
Yes, it's all good.
It's great. Thanks.
Okay. I will move this down. Okay. So again, good afternoon, good morning for those in the United States. We're just kicking off our day and you're finishing yours, so that this is a good time to go through some riveting information about cybersecurity, I hope. So we have a quick agenda today. It's we're going to talk about some trends that have changed a little bit since the pandemic has taken over the globe, and then we're going to dive into a little bit about a defense in depth strategy and demonstrate how a proper defense in depth strategy can assist with responding to a cyber attack. So without further ado, let's jump right in. As Jeff mentioned, I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. For those who are not familiar with Asheville, we are in the westernmost part of the state. And I work for Mission Hospital or Mission Health. Mission Health covers the lives of over 1 million individuals in Western North Carolina. So when you talk about a footprint of data, we have in our database over 1 million patient lives with millions and millions of encounters for each of those patients. So when you look over time as to what we have to protect, we do own about 7 hospitals. We have about 100 clinics, and in all the hospitals, we have about 1,000 registered beds. So at any one point, if we're at capacity, we would have about 1,000 patients inside of our hospital. And that doesn't include our emergency departments and our clinics where folks go to see physicians. So we have quite a bit of a footprint to monitor and manage from a cybersecurity threat perspective. We utilize about 2,500 servers and about 15,000 to 20,000 endpoint computers to manage all of that data. So it's certainly not the largest footprint in the world, but it is a rather large footprint for a group of people to manage from a cyber threat perspective. As far as Asheville goes, here I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Asheville's in the mountains of Western North Carolina. Beautiful place to come and visit. Would welcome you anytime to come. We have quite the tourist attraction here. Is there's just a lot to do in Asheville. This is a picture of downtown Asheville at night with the mountains in the background. It is beautiful. We boast that we have the largest residential residence in the United States here in Asheville, called the Biltmore House, that is open to the public and available for touring, and they have over 800 acres that you can explore when you're on the property as well. There's gardens, there's shops, there's restaurants, there's all kinds of things. It's a beautiful place if you've never been to Asheville. But we also have this is a neat picture of what's called the Grove Park Inn, one of our hotels here in Asheville, nestled inside of the hills. This is a neat place. This is a very old hotel, as you could tell, but modernized. It's got a full golf course and a lot of rooms and a spa, and so about 4 or 5 restaurants embedded inside of it. But one small fact that I'll share with you is that this is the location where the United States Supreme Court would meet if Washington, D.C. ever comes under a physical attack or a cyber attack that renders renders it unable to do business in Washington, D.C. So they would actually come here, or at least that's the agreement that they have, and would meet here and hold the Supreme Court activities here at this hotel. So that's a public document now, but that was established way back in the early 1900s. So very fascinating history here. We also boast some beautiful waterfalls. These are just some of the pictures that we've, of waterfalls around the area in Western North Carolina. Of course, with the mountains, you have a lot of opportunity for water runoff, and we do get snow during the winter. And so we do have opportunity for people to visit these waterfalls when you're here. And then this last picture is just a few shots of the downtown area. Asheville, as I mentioned, is a tourist location that has a lot of quaint shops and nice eateries, and as I mentioned, we do get snow during the winter because of our elevation. So we have Mount Mitchell nearby, which is the highest point east of the Mississippi, which you can visit if you come to this area. And we have just a lot of walking trails and the Blue Ridge Parkway. It's just beautiful. So welcome anytime. We would love to have you. With all that said, I'd like to get into the meat of the cyber presentation. And for those on the call, I don't have to remind you that things are changing rapidly in cyberspace, right? We have seen a real shift away. Well, I mean, not away from, but including where we used to be focused purely on data protection, and we had all the breaches that were occurring in different health systems and care providers and that type of thing, to now it has turned to physical safety. And we have a number of new types of threats where from ransomware to actual terror attacks on physical hospitals and that type of thing. And so it has really challenged us in this industry to think more than just cyber. In fact, our health system just incorporated physical security underneath our chief security officer. So we changed his title from chief information security officer to chief security officer, and we included physical security as well because of these new threats, to get all of the organization under one leader inside of the hospital system. With that said, in early 2020, during the pandemic, we saw a shift as well. People were very distracted, and it caused them to. There was a lot of shift toward moving work to home, and this had a great impact on our operations. We saw a 25% increase in our phishing emails. 250% increase in emails just coming from China. Not that email from China could be bad, but it is something that we don't expect inside of a health system that services up Western North Carolina. We wouldn't expect to see a 250% increase in emails coming from China. We don't have a lot of customers or patients that come from except during the summer, that come from China. So it was an interesting trend. And then we also saw a 300% increase in targeted email against our executive group. So we monitor our executive group a little differently than we do other folks, because they could be, their access to allowing change in the organization is significant. And so we want to make sure that if they are being targeted with email, that we catch that in up front. So we do a considerable amount of monitoring in the space. And then as we're all aware, one of the new risks that we saw introduced in 2020 was a focus on the supply chain and the whole SolarWinds hack. And so for those who are familiar with that, the hackers went after a company that most folks use, or there's a lot of companies that use SolarWinds to monitor our networks and to provide a security service for us. And so by attacking SolarWinds, the hackers were able to get inside, change code within SolarWinds, and then distribute that code, in effect, gaining inside access to companies that use SolarWinds. And so this was a game changer for those of us in the industry that monitor these types of attacks, because we've always been concerned about our third-party relationships with our vendors and the tools that we use, but we've always felt pretty secure that if they have code that's signed but within their organizations, digitally signed and distributed through their infrastructure, that we could trust that. And this turned that on its head and required us to think differently about our vendors and our relationships with them. I put at the top of this slide that this is war, because it's true. If any of you were tracking the response to the SolarWinds breach, Microsoft actually unleashed a program called the Death Star on the SolarWinds hackers as a response to the breach, going after the hackers themselves and creating, trying to get inside and take down that organization. So when we talk about this being war, this is true. From Mission Health's perspective, we actually sustain about 5,000 attacks per hour that we categorize, and most of those are handled through automated systems that monitor those threats and are able to block automatically. But of those 5,000 attacks per hour, we get about 13 events per day that we actually have to take and put human eyes onto it and actually respond to it. So we are definitely in the mix of being attacked regularly. And this is just because we have a treasure trove of data for patients, and that data can be used to commit a lot of types of fraud, including insurance fraud. That is a significant threat in the United States against our patients, where they can steal the identities and bill insurance companies for services that were never rendered. So that is what we're up against. So as we transition, I want to talk about, okay, so this is great. We all know that we're being attacked and we have this difficulty, but what can we certainly do about this? So let's run through this a little bit. Of course, in 2020, we also had the first known death from a cyber attack in Dusseldorf, Germany. There was actually a patient that was diverted because a hospital was taken down with ransomware. And when the woman was diverted to another hospital 20 miles away, she passed away or expired during that trip. And so that was a big first in 2020. And then I wanted to bring this up because we're going to talk about this at the end, about an actual attack that occurred on the Vermont Medical Center in upstate New York and Vermont that crippled their computer system and cost them about $1.5 million a day. And so we're going to talk about that at the end, and how possibly these security controls that we're explaining could help. So as far as a defense in depth strategy, good cybersecurity defense requires multiple layers, and that's what we're going to talk about today. It is important to implement your security controls and test your controls. So you're going to hear that as a common theme today. And so as we talk about these layers, I want to visualize it in the following way. If you picture your data as we call it, the crown jewels here at Mission Health, and so I've got a little crown that sits down in the corner, and so the crown jewels, or our data, are typically accessed by applications. Those applications are serviced up through our endpoints that we have that access those applications, and then there are platforms that sit over those endpoints that allow us to provide those services. So a platform could be an application or a series of applications that provide a service, if you will. Those platforms are serviced up by a network that we need to monitor, and that network has users jumping on and off all day long. And then on top of all of that, to protect all of this, we need a security operations center. So these are the layers that we're going to explore here in this presentation. And I just want to kind of expose you to some of the controls that we use in these different layers. Certainly, we could spend an hour's time on each one of these bullet points, and we just are not afforded the time to do that today. So we're going to hit these at a very high level. We certainly can't explore them down to the ultimate end, which is how you would deploy these. But as long as we expose ourselves to understanding what these control points may be, it will help us develop a strategy inside our own organizations. So let's start with the application layer over here. So as far as application layers, probably the best defense that you can have in the application space is to create a vendor risk management program. You can't treat all your vendors with the same risk. They're not all high risk, and they're certainly not all low risk vendors. So you need to have a way to risk rate your vendors based on key factors: the types of data that they're servicing up, the amount of data that they service up, and certainly the platform that they run on. Are they running in the cloud system that would be accessed by the internet or through the internet, or are they hosted on-prem? That all affects your risk rating for those vendors. And then I would suggest that you work with the vendor to validate their security controls. So it's really about creating a partnership with your vendors, and then executing security agreements with your vendors to help them understand what the expectations are around your data. So if you're going to be sharing data with this vendor, and they're going to be processing data, storing it on your behalf, you want to set up expectations up front. When an incident occurs or when a breach occurs at their location or in their infrastructure, what is that vendor required to do to notify you, to help you understand what is happening? And again, I use that word partnership, but it truly is. With each vendor, you need to have a partnership in place that you trust each other, that when something goes wrong, that they're going to notify you and that you're going to be part of that solution in coming to a recommended end of assessing what occurred and how it occurred. You also need to run your high-risk applications through a testing protocol. I would really consider using third-party tools for this. There are a lot out there, and we could explore each one of those. As I mentioned, we could explore every single one of these bullets for a period of time. But from a high level, just consider using third-party tools, and then testing your code. Any code that you develop internally, test it for vulnerabilities. So come up with a vulnerability testing protocol. Make sure your third parties are doing the same, as I mentioned. And then regularly review your privileged access. So this is access to the application itself. So who are your database administrators? Do they have the right level of access? Are they utilizing that access? Are you determining if they haven't used that access in a period of time? Are you taking that access away from them until they need it again, and not just leaving it set out there unused? That would be dangerous. So those are controls that you could put in place as well. And then seek opportunities to reduce your data footprint. As I mentioned, we have 1 million patients, but we go through a purge on a regular basis. We are required to obtain or to manage data for a period of time for certain types of data, but not all data is required to be maintained for a long period of time. So we have data policies in place, and we classify our data, and then we set out to purge that data once it is no longer useful to us. And of course, backing it up and then purging it in case we ever need to get it back and storing it in a secure vault somewhere offline. So if we are compromised in the event, the footprint of data that the hackers could access is limited to what we actually need to perform our operations. So that's the application space. Let's move to the endpoint security. As we talk about endpoint security, you want to encrypt your endpoints. Some of these are just common sense today, right? We all do these things because The technology is there and available and cost effective. And so, but I do want to make sure that we call these out so that we don't miss an opportunity in case we forget the low hanging fruit, if you want to call it that. Locking down our USB connected devices, very important. Controlling administrative rights to our endpoints. Just because users think that they need administrative rights to their endpoints to be able to install things or have freedom to do something with their endpoint is not necessarily the best strategy. So create a policy around who gets administrative rights, how they get it, and an exception process if they need it in the event of emergency. But really build your security controls in your organization around controlling those rights and preventing people from needing them. So whatever use cases that you come up with where an end user may need user rights, try to migrate those processes over to a centralized management group who could manage that on their behalf. That goes to endpoints as well, mobile endpoints. So we have a big footprint in our hospitals of mobile devices. Our nurses carry them, our physicians carry them, and they're used for communication. And so managing those centrally, controlling what applications get put on those devices, controlling the fact that they do not have a cellular signal to them is one of the things that we do. And then monitoring for inappropriate data movement. We utilize we call it DLP, or data loss protection protocol or program inside of our organization, and that covers both our endpoints, our users, and our network. And so you'll see that hit on a couple of these different layers. And then goes without saying, make sure that you're controlling access to which websites users can access at the endpoint. If you have an intelligence feed that comes in, it would be appropriate. Blocking domains that some of these tools are great. They block domains that were recently set up. So if a domain hasn't been in existence for more than a certain amount of time that you can prescribe, you just can't access those, and that prevents you from accessing newly established domains that could be used for hacking and those types of things. So keeping that database up to date is key and important. So that's the endpoint security. We talked about the data security and the application, or the endpoint in the application. Now let's move over to the platform. So as far as platform security goes, make sure you're hardening your devices, creating a standard image for both your endpoints and your servers. In a company, as you roll out desktop computers and servers, you want to make sure that they are built to a standard, that standard is maintained and updated, and that as new devices are rolled out, that they are rolled out to that standard. Of course, it goes without saying that we need to maintain currency, and what we mean by that is are your endpoints and servers patched? That is probably the greatest single control today that any company can implement, is a very robust patching program, and understanding threats to those endpoints and those programs, right? So this is what the hackers knew about SolarWinds. They knew that SolarWinds distributed patches out on a regular basis. So what made that so unique was they infiltrated the patching program, and companies like ours that rely on SolarWinds to automatically update our software, of course, unknowingly downloaded software that had vulnerabilities built into it by the hackers. And so that is something that is a game changer, as I mentioned. Backing up our devices, this goes without saying. If you're going to respond appropriately to ransomware, without paying the ransom, and we never recommend that anyone pays the ransom, we would strongly suggest that having a strong backup program would be important. Business continuity. Why do we talk about this? This answers the question, how does your business function run without technology, as opposed to disaster recovery, which is a focus on how do you recover once you're attacked and get services back online. Business continuity focuses on how could we run our business if we do not have access to technology. And I'll talk about that more when we get up to the security operations level. We'll talk about a good program in that space. Managing unmanaged devices. That's a mouthful, right? Hospitals are notorious for this. We have a ton of equipment. We have a lot of equipment inside of our hospitals that connect to the network that are not managed by our IT or information technology department, right? These could include medical devices that monitor patient care, devices that release medications to the nursing and physician staff as necessary, controls around those medications. And all of that equipment sits on the network and receives instructions from upstream and downstream platforms to manage those the care given to the patients. And a lot of times we don't build these out with standard operating systems. They have a built for purpose operating system on them. And so we need to understand an inventory of what we have on our network and how we manage those separately or uniquely from our standard desktops and servers, and coming up with a program around that. Next is, assessing for vulnerable systems. Of course, coming up with a vulnerability management program is important. And then monitoring our platforms for behaviors that don't necessarily, wouldn't necessarily jump off the page as a breach. And so let me kind of give you an example of that. I'll stop for a minute and explain that one, because that could be a little bit confusing. So let's take a platform like we'll call a network firewall system. Network firewalls do a great job of blocking attempts to access internal resources from the outside. And so all day long, we get hundreds of logs, thousands of logs, millions of logs that tell us, hey, this IP address is trying to access and it's blocked. But what would happen if you see one of those IP addresses that has been blocked all day long, all of a sudden show up and access a system internally with the same IP address that has been blocked all day long? That's a behavior that should concern us and we should take action against, right? So you have a normal behavior on one side and a normal behavior on the other, but the two of them added together create a situation that you would have concern over. A group of IPs that is being blocked, and then all of a sudden one of those IPs showing up and accessing internal resources. That is something that we should look into and do some more diving into. So that's behavioral monitoring at its most simple form. Strongly recommend that you put a program around that together. And then lifecycle management. I already touched on this a little bit, but information lifecycle. Don't maintain data that you don't need to maintain. It sounds very simple, but get rid of that data as soon as possible. Implement good controls around your data. So that's platform. Next up, we'll talk about the network. We got two more sections to go. So the network is important because we have to create a segmented network, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. Just creating, I talked about medical devices. We put all of our medical devices on a separate network so that if one of those were to be compromised, they can't, it would have to, it would be blocked from accessing our primary network and where our servers sit and our endpoints, and even our endpoints were segregated from from our servers in a way, and all of that is controlled through firewalls. So very important control. Standing up intrusion prevention systems and a 24/7 by 365-day monitoring program, right? That you can't feel comfortable with going home at the end of the day if you don't have somebody monitoring your network overnight and through the weekends and even on holidays. The hackers do not take time off. And so that is an important piece. Creating robust logging, consider centralized management of logs, and then enhanced triage. So have a plan and work the plan for suspicious network events. A lot of times what I see in our industry is companies are great at establishing a plan, but then when something goes wrong or something goes bump in the night, as we call it, there's a suspicious event occurs, they reinvent the plan on the fly. And so they do not trust their plan. And so that's one thing that I would strongly encourage is once you create your plan and test your plan, trust the plan, follow the plan. When an event occurs, make sure that you follow the planning that you've put into place. Otherwise, it all goes out the window, if you will. Creating network access controls, if you can. Website application firewalls, they're called WAFs. Those are important. And then standing up a controlled gateway presence for your vendors. So there are a lot of times when vendors need to manage systems on your internal network that can't be segregated off to a separate network. So controlling that access for your vendors is very important. On top of the network, we have our users that access the network, right? So we want to make sure that we have background checks. So partner with your human resources departments in your companies to do background checks. Be careful about how you approach your role-based access. I've seen a lot of companies implement an overcomplicated methodology for role-based access. And then there are other companies that go too basic. They go with employees versus non-employees. There needs to be a sweet balance that you strike somewhere in the middle. And so what does role-based achieve? It prevents certain activities from occurring by staff that do not need to, have that access. So, for instance, in a hospital, we would not see a nurse typically. He or she would not typically do ordering of products or ordering of medication. That's left to the physician. So limiting the role of the nursing staff to not have the rights to be able to place physician orders is important. And so having that segregation of duties and putting that in place. As far as privilege and access, admin access, just consider implementing an emergency access management strategy. And then reviewing access on a regular basis, removing access from people who no longer need it. Utilizing strong authentication. If you can stand up your high-risk applications with multi-factor authentication in some way, that would be a great control to put in place at the user level. It's very helpful to make sure that that user is who they say they are by having something they physically present on them that they have, including their password. So they use their password and something else like a text message on a phone or a token of some sort, or even a certificate that they have been issued to access their systems. I can't stress enough training, proper training of your users. A trained workforce will save you thousands of euros in cleanup costs at the end of the day. And so it is really important to make sure that you have a good training program in place. And I would strongly also recommend that you tag your emails, right? And so what do I mean by that? Any email that we get from an external source comes in and it says external on it. This helps us to take a pause before we open it up and just, regardless of who it says it's from, we think about this and say, why would that person be sending me an email from external if they are an internal resource or an internal customer of ours? So that helps us take a pause and really protect ourselves against the root cause of most ransomware today, which is targeted email attacks. And then I've already mentioned and talked about data loss or leak protection, having that at the user layer as well, looking for anomalies. Who is copying sensitive data to USB devices if they're not locked down, or who is emailing out data? Do you have protocols set up and response mechanisms in place for that? And then our last layer that we'd like to talk about is security operations. So as we talk about security operations, this is the group of people responsible for making sure that operations stay steady state, and when we need to utilize the network and the programs that we access, that we have appropriate access. So I would strongly recommend companies purchase and deploy a security incident event manager. This helps you take disparate logs and consolidate them together into one platform. A lot of these platforms are getting better at using artificial intelligence to start analyzing that, and data science to analyze those logs to look for trends. As I mentioned before, trends like 2 events that are normal, I'll call them, on your network, but added together, they produce an abnormal scenario that you would want to check out. Those programs are very good at that. And then performing team testing, right? Test your own security controls, so utilizing your security operations group to attack, defend, and switch it up. You know, have half of them attack and half of them defend, and then flip it and have the defenders do the attacking and the attackers do the defending. This strengthens your team as they monitor your network. I would certainly recommend that you purchase or include in your defensive skills intelligent feeds. There's a lot out there. Some are free, some require you to pay money for them. But those intelligence feeds will tell you when a SolarWinds may be at risk, and you can tie those intelligence feeds in through your security incident event manager into some of your platforms, so that you can automatically be alerted that says, hey, you're running this vulnerable version of a particular platform, and we just received intelligence saying that that platform is vulnerable to a 0-day attack. You need to get eyes on that immediately and take care of that. And so all of this is where it all comes together. One of my favorites, and I love this, I can't speak enough about it, we could do a whole session on this alone, but utilizing honeypots. So we have a whole network of computers that are left in a vulnerable state, that are protected from the rest of the network in a special way inside of our hospitals, but they are left in an unpatched and vulnerable state intentionally, so that if we start to see lateral movement inside of our network by hackers, they would attack those devices first. They're going to categorize those devices, see that they're vulnerable, and start working on attacking those. Of course, we've got a heightened state of security monitoring on those honeypots, as we call them, and they are used to help alert us in the early event of a cyber attack. And so it's a great intelligence network that we have built inside of our network that tells us when something is going wrong internally. So this is assuming that someone's already made it inside and they're moving laterally. We can use those honeypots to tell us, hey, this doesn't look right. Somebody's attacking this, and why are they attacking it? So there's a whole protocol around that. then I can't stress enough understanding your cloud strategy. We're all companies are moving to the cloud in some way, whether it's private cloud, public cloud, or hybrid cloud. We're all utilizing it to some degree. And so making sure that your security operations team understands the cloud strategy that your company uses and where you have cloud deployed and what you're utilizing it for will help you monitor that environment better. And then setting up forensic tools is important. Not only getting the tools, but training your workforce on the use of those tools, and then testing those tools to make sure that they're working. And then performing internal security audits, that's important. And then the last one I'll leave us with for this section is performing regular tabletop exercises. So I discussed in the past, just a little bit ago, about business continuity, but it is very important. You saw that hospital that from Germany that had to divert patients. I'm guessing, I don't know for a fact, but I'm guessing that they did not have a strong protocol around what to do if they had to shut their doors based on an attack. That is something that we as hospitals, businesses, they should really strongly consider sitting down with your leadership team and saying, let's assume that we've been attacked. Let's assume that there is no IT. Now what do we do? How do we maintain, how do we triage and maintain patient care in a way that does not put patients at risk? And so, yes, we may need to divert patients, but how do we stabilize them to get them to be diverted to another hospital in the event that we have that situation? So that's a really important one for hospitals as well as key infrastructure companies, and so we need to be performing that on a regular basis. So again, as we layer all of these together, we come up with a protocol or a program that helps us manage security at all of these layers. And so that is so important today. The last thing that I'll leave you with, and we're running out of time, so I'll just be quick about this, but if you study the past events, and I talked about this one at the beginning, that Vermont medical center that was attacked. If you look at some of the details on this, just look at some of the pertinent facts, right? They were attacked on October 28th of last year. This article came out on December 9th. So we're over a month after that. If you look, it says that they were only 70% recovered from the attack. So after a month, they were still 30% down. The attack left them with all of their 5,000 computers on the network were infected, and so they needed to rebuild from the ground up on the entire network. And so having security segregation and that type of thing was something that they recognized that they didn't have. In fact, the CEO actually says in here, and I outlined it. He says that going forward, they are planning to decouple parts of the network. So when we study this attack, when we go back and look at actually what happened and reference our, I'll call it our security architecture here, there are a number of controls that I identified in red here that would have played a key benefit to a hospital system like University of Vermont when they were attacked, if they had had these in place. Now, I'm not saying that they didn't. I don't know anyone that works there or have not talked to them personally about this attack, but I go back and I think about the different things that they recognize, that it took them, so long to recover. They didn't have it seemed like they didn't have a good disaster recovery plan in place. They certainly didn't catch this early enough if it was able to and segregate systems that were infected early in the life cycle of the threat. If it impacted all 5,000 of their workstations. And then I would strongly suspect that they hadn't run regular tabletop exercises to talk about what would happen given the fact that it took them over a month and they still weren't recovered from 30% of their network was still down at that point. And so if I can leave you with this, these are the security controls, but the key takeaways for today are just an understanding that you are being attacked. Every company today, every health system is being attacked on a regular basis. Do you know about it? Are you informed? Are you getting key metrics? Those types of things. We can't assume that we're not being attacked today. It is important to understand that, and a good defense requires a multi-layered strategy, and we laid that out today. And then understanding what we are trying to protect. If you don't start there, if you don't understand what your crown jewels are, that is what we need to protect, and all of those layers are no good if we don't understand where our data is and how it's accessed and what we're trying to do with that data. So I'd leave you with this: setting up proper controls, testing those controls, and then in most importantly, test scenarios as if those controls do not work, as if they do not hold. So that's the key takeaways from today. I hope that was helpful. I welcome any questions if we have them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Truly, thank you so much. I do want to encourage our audience to type the questions in the chat or Q&A boxes, because this is truly a great opportunity to get Jim to respond to your questions. And truly, thank you for, I think there were so many practical tips and kind of such a good oversight. Jeff, would you have any questions to lead on? And I see already one question appeared in the chat box. Great, so keep typing the questions. Jeff?
Yes, I do. So let me just provide two comments while the questions come in. And the first is, Jim, thank you for providing such a insightful overview of cybersecurity, posturing, and things you do on a day-to-day basis. This is so helpful. And I want to say that partly because a lot of what you're saying is what we teach during the cybersecurity bootcamp. In fact, we go beyond and we actually go into the tools, right? So we go into the digital tools. We're on right this week on malicious topic on the different tools that we use. You talk about the security, incident, event management. We use Splunk for that. And so thank you. So I know that one of my students is going to be asking a question. And so I'll let him do that. But before I do, a second comment here is from the US perspective. And I know this is common knowledge on the deep web. Your compromised credit card information is sold in 10,000 blocks of about 25 cents to 50 cents. All right, so anybody can go onto the dark web and purchase compromised credit cards. Yes. For you, Jim, in the world that you operate in, unfortunately, you are tasked to protect Social Security numbers on the US side, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, us on the US side, we cannot change our Social Security. And on the dark website, Social Security are going for $75 to $100 per account, per number. So you have the additional burden of protecting really very sensitive information, and AKA Social Security numbers. So hats off to you guys. That will be my comment, and I'll leave it for you to look at the questions that come in from the chat.
Yeah, I see one coming in right now, and the question is, what is the main challenge that we could face when we implement a multi-layered concept? So it's a great question, because it was the question that I faced when I came here to the health system from my previous employer was a large financial insurance company based out of New York City. And so developed a lot of these strategies working for that company, but then came to a health system that was had a considerable shortfall in cash and resources and that type of thing. And so the biggest challenge you're going to have is coming up with the funding of this. And there's a follow-up question that says, should we consider all layers as being the same importance? No, absolutely not, right? And so it starts with your jewels and your crown jewels and what you can do to get the most effective campaign going at the beginning. So addressing your low-hanging fruit first. When I came into the health system here, identified the need for about $8 million US dollars of resources that I was going to need to build out a multi-layered strategy like this. And of course, the health system didn't have those types of resources. And so what I did was I started to lay it out in a 5-year program and building layers on top of layers. So we started with the low-hanging fruit. We really attacked our identity and access control, moving from the right to the left. If you're looking at the picture, we really started down in that corner and saying, what can we do to help our applications and our users and that type of thing with the access, and spent our money there. The last piece that we built out was some of the more robust tools that were expensive, but were helping us respond to threats. We needed to control the threats first. And so it's a great question. Your answer is you're going to run into financing challenges, and so take the program slow, implement it piece by piece. But the most effective thing you can do as a leader is come in with a plan and execute that plan effectively, and teaching your board of directors, your leaders in the companies that you certainly are aware of the plan and know how to execute this. I'm not sure if I'm seeing anyone else, any other questions at this point. I think Isa, you're on mute.
Yes, I found myself being muted. Just at the very beginning, when you were talking about about the cyber attacks, and then one statement you made is that, well, the general policy or the leaning towards is that the ransom would not be paid towards when the attacks happen. So is that a general statement for the entire industry, kind of like, or is this what organizations try to avoid in the attacks, in the situations when attacks happen?
Yeah, it's a real good philosophical discussion, and one that I've taken to our board of directors. The question that I asked our board of directors is, what would have to occur for you to be convinced that we would have to pay a ransom? What would be that sentinel event that we would have to, what line would we have to cross in order to have to pay that? And because our recommendation strongly is that we would never pay it. And our board came back out with, oh yeah, we would never pay a ransom. Well, that's easier said than when you're in the middle of a catastrophic outage where, paying $1 million to a hacker will get you back online immediately. That is a tough ask to sit back and watch while you're holding ground, saying that we would not pay the ransom. There's two problems with paying a ransom. One, it reinforces negative behavior, right? So the more hackers make money on these types of events, the more they're empowered to do more and more hacking in that level. So the only reason ransomware is so successful is because people do pay. Right. And then the second challenge with ransomware is that you are not guaranteed, one, that you may not even get the keys back. There are some ransomware groups that do not restore your data once you've paid the ransom. And then there are others that will come back and attack you again. And so they learned, oh yeah, that group will pay a ransom, and it gets publicized that, let's say Mission did pay a ransom, it gets publicized that we did. Now other companies want to attack us as well because they know we will pay it. And so it's strongly recommended that you do not pay.
I mean, it was very good to hear how you were saying how you were even talking about with your leadership about this, and when you were showing one of the strategies is to have that plan, right, to be prepared. So I guess this is exactly also one of those questions that has to be on the table and kind of predetermined before anything happens.
The time to develop your policy around these types of activities is not during an event.
Right.
It is prior to an event. So having those discussions early will help you implement that multi-layered strategy.
Right. Jeff, I would like just to kind of to turn to you for your comments. So LCC is running the Cybersecurity Bootcamp program in partnership with Cybin. So how much of what we were learning today, right? And you made a brief comment, but I just want to kind of address that in particular. How much of this is being covered by the bootcamp program? How much students do learn beyond this? And and even maybe Jim, if your advice would be for anyone who is interested in the field of the cybersecurity and who wants to learn more and get excited about what they were learning during this webinar, what would you recommend as the next steps? And Jeff, from your standpoint, is the bootcamp then the right next step or not?
Yeah, thank you. So as I was looking at Jim's overall slide presentation, it sensed that certainly upon completion of the cybersecurity bootcamp, our students will be well equipped to begin a entry-level position. Many of these concepts are taught and discussed and practiced. So we certainly have the breadth, but the depth can certainly be developed on the entity side, meaning the hospital, the company that does the hiring. So it really shortens the time and preparation that a company would need to bring a person in to provide all that training. Our graduates certainly have the skill set to begin work. And definitely, I would advise companies hiring our graduates to do some form of assessment, right? Certainly, there are skill sets that we bring that students excel in, but I'm also sure that certain areas that the company would like to emphasize. So in overall treatment to this, I would say that our students are well prepared to enter a facility, whether it's a oil and exploration company, a healthcare, banking, finance. Our students have the prerequisites to do a good job at an entry-level position.
Thank you. Jim, any comments to the general audience? I mean, to those who truly got excited about your presentation and kind of in the field in general, like any inspiration to them?
Yeah. The last thing I'll just leave you with is this is a great time to be in this field. There is a lot of work, and we need really strong individuals that are willing to fight the fight with us. And so, I really would strongly encourage anyone to avail yourself of opportunities like boot camp and the workshops that are offered through LCC. It'll advance your career and give you. There's nothing worse than feeling like you have a career that's a dead end. Well, this is not one of those. I wake up every day enthusiastic about what are we going to see next? What is the next challenge? What do we need to attack? And how can we find out what the hackers are doing now? And so you get a chance to learn each and every day. So you picked a great field. This is a fantastic time to be here, and we need more. We have a shortage of people in this field that are helping us, and so we have a negative unemployment rate here in the United States for this field particularly. And so there are more jobs than there are people that can fill those jobs. So we're hoping to increase the pool of individuals that can work in this space.
Right, and that is exactly the same trend in Europe and I guess worldwide. Thank you, Jim, truly so much for your time and for the detailed presentation.